Hi buddies, I'm coming to you from my basement. This is where my actual desk lives. It had been far too small and far too cluttered to work on, but now it's grown. It's very long. You can't see it because it's not at the shop. I'll have to show you a picture later. But I've been really enjoying working from down here and having a place set aside just to work, and I might just leave the light here and make this the spot where we film. So we'll figure that out. All a work in progress. Way too many details for the beginning of a video, but I'm here to sit down for just a little bit and talk to you about my book. I know I've talked about it a lot. It's loud upstairs. I'm here sitting down to talk to you about my book. I know I've already talked about it a lot, but I wanted to do a little question and answer video to answer some of the queries that people have sent about writing a book and the self-publishing process. So I'm just gonna sit down and do that real quick, and hopefully it's interesting. I have my laptop here. Jim asks, what other books had an influence on how you wrote yours? And if you've read my book, you know this, but if you don't, I will clue you in. There's actually a list here in the back of my book of all of the books that I read in 2018 while I did the big chunk of writing on this book. And there are a few, if I go down the list, I can kind of pull out that were really helpful. A lot of the books that I was reading that were the most inspirational for me as far as genre and context were other memoirs. So this one, Furiously Happy by Jenny Lawson. It has a taxidermied, what is it? Trash panda. What are those called? Raccoon. It has a taxidermy raccoon on the cover. I quite enjoyed it. I like how she talks about her mental health journey. Very different than mine, but I was inspired by her vulnerability. I read a book called Of Mess and Moxie by Jen Hatmaker. I also really liked that book. The Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes. I also read that year, and that one was really inspirational to me in a lot of ways. I think specifically reading that helped me put a start and end to what I was going to talk about in my book, because I think that was a big part of the writing process that was hard for me, was finding a stopping point and knowing when it was done. So my book, the chapters of my book are January through December, the months of the year, and giving myself that context of just 1 year made it much easier for me to kind of see the starts and stops. And I could tell stories from beyond back into the past, but they all had to connect in some way to that year. I read a lot of fiction, and fiction doesn't specifically relate to the book that I wrote, but I think that all storytelling, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, is inspirational, especially as someone finding her own voice and learning how to tell my own story. I think hearing other stories about other people was helpful. Yeah, I'm grateful that I have this list, that I took the time to make this long list of books that I read. It was 55 read in 2018. It's a little bit more than I read in 2019. I think I had like 51 or 52. But I really love reading. I think that reading is a huge way to keep my brain working when it comes to words and writing. So yeah, those are some of the books that inspired me. This person on Instagram asked, are there things you would do differently if you self-publish a second book? Probably. I'm pleased with how it went. I'm really pleased with all of it, and I'm definitely writing a second book. In fact, I've started writing a second book. I only have about 500 words done, but it's a start. They all start from somewhere. And I think what I will do differently next time is not necessarily different in how I write or how I publish or how I market it, but just that I will be more bold in believing in myself and that it's possible. Because for the first time, writing my first book and publishing by myself for the first time was daunting, and I had a lot of days where I thought, I can't do this, or I'm going to give up because it's too scary. And now that I've been through the process and I know that it is possible and that I can do it, I think I would be more bold in reaching out to readers in advance. I'd be more bold in talking to the press and in calling myself an author a little sooner, because I'm feeling comfortable calling myself this now, but when I was marketing my book, it felt daunting and just a lot of self-doubt. So I think I'll do it similarly. I really liked the process of being involved with every step of the way on my book, and it would be hard to hand some of that off if I worked with a publisher. I think a lot of the things in my life that I have regrets about are not necessarily the things that I did or didn't do, but just letting my brain tell me I'm worthless and can't do things in the midst of doing them, because it doesn't derail me enough to stop doing those things, but it makes them painful and difficult in the middle, if that makes sense. Let's see, next question. Postcardist Frank, hello Frank, asks, when did you find writing time? I wrote everywhere. And a lot of this book I wrote in a Google document on my phone. So if my son fell asleep in the car, which doesn't happen very often anymore, but was happening more when I started writing, I would sit and let him nap and write in my car. If I had time on an airplane or time with just my notebook and a pen, I would sit down and write. And I literally wrote on like planes, trains, and automobiles. It's silly, but I wrote all the time. And I can remember a few days where I could set aside an entire day to write, but very few days like that. So I think I really needed to write this book. For me, writing wasn't as difficult as editing, because getting everything out of my brain and onto the page felt really wonderful. But then going back and rereading and rereading and rereading and moving things around and changing things and editing, that part took more discipline on my part. I would say I could write 1,000 books, and if I didn't have to personally edit them or reread them to keep working on them, it would be a whole lot easier. I don't know when I did it. I just did whatever I could when I could, and eventually it all came together. Somebody asked the question, did you try to work with a publisher before deciding to self-publish? And yes, I had a coffee meeting with a publisher contact and had emailed back and forth a little bit. And my experience is not all that different than most self-publishing authors' experience. Just I was basically told that my concept wasn't marketable. And that doesn't mean that the book wasn't worth writing. It doesn't mean that the book wasn't worth reading. It doesn't mean that the book wasn't financially worth selling. But for a publisher to put out an advance and then to pay an editor and to pay a designer and to like do all of the stuff to make a book sell, they need to know that it's going to be of mass appeal and easy to sell to someone who's never heard of the author. And that's not where I'm at right now in my career. This is my first book. This is my first time doing anything of this scale. And it's difficult for a publisher to want to take a gamble on that. I actually wrote about it quite a bit. I might just find that part and read it to you. So I'll just read you a little section that I feel like helps answer this question. It says, it's humbling to be rejected, but it's nothing compared to the utter garbage person my depressed brain likes to tell me that I am. Trauma and depression have worked diligently together to teach me the benefits of silence. Blessed be the silent, for they shall never rock the boat. Blessed be she who shuts her stupid mouth. In Of Mess and Moxie, Jen Hatmaker says, makers don't wait for someone else to tell them they should and they can. They already know they should and they can. I can feel the truth of that deep in my bones. The things I write and create have always bubbled up out of me, despite my efforts to tamp them down. The more I hold them off, the more violently and passionately they push their way out. I'm a writer by nature, not by choice. But I'm a writer whose life story has served me so many valid reasons not to write. I'm fighting with those reasons now. I'm used to being rejected, but I'm also used to being the one to gamble on myself. There have been countless times in my career I've had to be my own advocate. I've gotten good at evangelizing my own story, skills, and worth. No one looks for a 23-year-old art school grad turned entrepreneur to invest in. Some opportunities have to be made for yourself. I'm not 23 anymore, by the way. I'm 33, so just heads up in case there's any confusion. There are so many things about the beginning of my career that I wish I could go back and edit. But by looking back, I can also see the ways that my optimism and youthfulness were an asset to me. Basically, all of that to say that I had one contact with a publisher, and when that didn't work out, I was just far too scared to ask anyone else. And I think that that is a symptom of being a first-timer, of all of the weird brain stuff that I've been working through these last few years. I think sometimes when I want to do something and I have to fight for it and I have to make it happen and I have to demand of myself to bring it into being, I think I'm good at that. And I think the reason I can feel confident calling myself an author now is because no one gave me an opportunity to be an author. I made my own opportunity. And that's how I own a business, and how I have the career that I have is because I just never took no for an answer. And that doesn't mean I didn't hear a lot of no's along the way. I've heard thousands, trust me. But with each big no, I've been able to build a foundation out of 1,000, 100,000, a million tiny yeses. And every person that has purchased a card or everyone who's read my book is just one little yes. And together, all of that really makes a difference. I gotta make sure my kid's not answering the door. The mail came. Take this opportunity to just go ahead and open this because it just showed up in my mailbox. A beautiful package from Mike. I love these giant envelopes. They are my favorite. It says, "Dear Sarah, you owned 2019. 2020 will be an even bigger year for you. Congratulations on your book and happy birthday. All the very best to my favorite captain, Mike." And she will live to send snail mail in abundance. That's perfect. That will set me up well for InCoWriMo, International Correspondence Writing Month. This is my first year officially participating, and I'm very excited about it. Some also call it Letter Month. However you call it, please join me. I'll be sending a handwritten card every day for the month of February, and I'm excited about it. So join me if you'd like. Make me feel my feelings. Hopefully that answered that question. It was a very long roundabout way to answer that. And then Frank also asked, another one from Frank. We love our Frank. Would you have self-published if you didn't have mad design skills? And he spelled skills with a Z, which cool kids over here. Can an average person even begin to lay out a book? I have a graphic design degree, and I focused very much in school on layout and book design. Those were all my favorite projects, the ones I spent the most time on. But I'm also 10 years out of school. So it's been a little while since I had done a project like this. I do design catalogs, like sales catalogs for Constellation & Co. So I'm always working on design. I'm always working on typography, but a book project was definitely a bigger undertaking than even I kind of thought. I was very excited about it and wanted to start designing it like 3 minutes into writing it, but kept myself to waiting until at least I had finished the first draft. I think some of what it made it complicated is that I included an absolute glut of photos. There's a ton of photos in here. There's lots of postcards and letters from family and some of my illustrations. And yeah, it took a lot. And I think the reason that it took a lot was because I wanted it to be so very meticulous and specific. And so every time I changed something, I'd have to then like reflow the layout. And I went through and what they call the edge of a set of paragraphs is the rag. So the way that and it's been a long time since I design school, so I don't know if I'm going to describe this well, but basically the flow of how long and short the sentences are is important. And I meticulously went through every page trying to make sure that the sentences flowed in a way that was aesthetically pleasing. And I could hear my college professors in my ears being like, fix it. And one of my college professors actually purchased the book, and hopefully I've made him proud. Jeff, if you're out there, let me know what you think. So I don't even know how to answer that. I would not say that I'm an average person, not because I'm superhuman or anything crazy like that, but just because I came at this process with design being the one thing I knew that I could accomplish. Writing felt scarier. And I've talked to some people lately who have like literature degrees, and I'm like, I wish that I had taken more classes about writing and about publishing and other things in addition to just design. I think that if at all possible, investing in a relationship with a good designer is important. There were times where I wished that I could say, here's my tweaks, please finish them. But I ended up pulling a bunch of all-nighters, especially at the very end of the process, to get it done in time for release day. But I enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that. So if you can find a designer to work with that enjoys all the meticulous, crazy parts of it, I think that will serve you well. I think that if you're willing to bootstrap some of the costs of working with an editor and a designer, you can be a self-publisher without being a designer, for sure. I was able to do my process less expensively, is that a word? Because I was the designer. But I did work with an editor and pay her for the main edit, which helped me a lot. So I would say any average person can do anything if you find the right people to work with. And if you do the research and learn what you need to learn to do it, I say go for it. Considering it sounds like bowls in a china shop upstairs, I'm going to go ahead and end this video. If you have any other questions about my book or the self-publishing process, please comment below. I will take a look and try to answer as best that I can. And hey, if you want to write a book, I say go for it. Even if you have a 5-year-old running above your head back and forth like it's a racetrack, I think you should do it. It is possible. So thank you for watching. If you're not already subscribed, please do that. Join us. There's sirens. This is chaos. I'm gonna go. See you in the next one.
Snail Superstar.
Of all the books that I read a book called Postcardist Frank asks, sound like elephants upstairs. I think feeling a little better. Oh no, now the furnace is on. My house is loud. Dang it. And I actually wrote about it quite a book. It's a big, oh my God. What's up, dude? Close the door. Thank you. Ow. I don't even know what I was talking about. Basically, like, what were, I know better than to do it like this.